If I can't, I'd have to get back my books out. But I think that sage was for a stomach upset, but I'm not sure. So, you know, I don't. I shouldn't have said that maybe because I can't remember. But I would make peppermint tea and spearmint tea for upset stomachs. Um, I can't. And of course, the sage was great to cook with, and you could use it in lots of dishes. And one plant that I always liked, which is not native to this area, but that's lemongrass. It's you either have to bring it in the fall or just start new in the spring, but you can use the bulb for that. I used fennel, and I would use the fennel bulb in salads. That was really good. And a lot of these plants are so high in minerals and nutrients. Um, and I know that when I realized that kudzu was edible and dandelions, and I used to say that if you lived in this part of the country, you'd never starve because kudzu and dandelions were edible and it was everywhere. Also, water lilies, the root of water lilies could be dried and powdered, and I think you could also use it as you would a potato. I can't remember. It's been so long since I tried that one, and it worked fine as a potato.
I remember one time you put violets on one of our birthday cakes.
I used a lot of edible flowers because I didn't use pesticides or herbicides, and so I could, if I wanted to use flowers, I just went out in the garden and picked them if they were edible. I what is we called it pot marigold, but I think it's I don't remember the name of that flower, but it was a peppery, spicy, almost like a nasturtium flower and leaf. But it was so good in salads, and it was colorful. Um, I used to plant tansy around the house, a lot of it. It kind of became invasive, and I've managed to get, not that I really wanted to get rid of all of it, but I don't have any more of it because tansy would keep insects away from your house, so I had it around the house.
Now, have you been a member of any kind of like plant clubs or flower clubs or anything like
Well,
that? I can't
I
remember.
am a long-term, I guess, 30-year member of a garden club in Johnson City, and we we older members used to really dirty, and I really get dirty and gardened a lot, and we used to laugh. We said we always have dirt under our fingernails, but now the dynamics of that club have changed a little bit, and a lot of the people in it don't garden like they used to, and some of us older ones have cut back so much that we don't do much gardening anymore.
Now, when you had a big garden, what did you grow in the, when you had a big garden? When that was where your main source of, when you were doing lots of canning and had lots of vegetables, what vegetables did you grow in your garden?
Well, we had we would have a garden, um, maybe not quite a half acre garden, a little less, but we raised corn, squash, beets, celery, beans, squashes, cucumbers, tomatoes, okra, eggplant, um, cabbage, peas, just the typical
Sweet potatoes,
sweet potatoes and Irish potatoes.
corn. Did you say corn?
Hmm. And we had a large freezer, and I froze a lot, and I also canned a lot. I made
And
a
you
lot.
made juice, grape juice,
Yes, yeah, I
that
made a lot.
sometimes turned into wine. Did you make homemade mead, wine?
Well, my husband's Aunt Mary and I used to make wine.
How did you make that?
Um, Goodness, I'd have to find the recipe. We would, I believe we used yeast. Gosh, I can't remember, Sarah, how we made it.
Well, there's
But
a
I remember one time, we made it in big gallon jugs, and we put a balloon over the top of the jug, and hold it in place with a rubber band, and whatever chemical process was happening, which I can't remember now, all the steps, but the balloon would inflate. And one day the balloon inflated in Aunt Mary's kitchen, and we had red wine all over the kitchen that we had to clean up. grape juice was so easy to make. I just washed the grapes and put them in a quart jar as full as I could get it, and then pour some sugar water over that and process them. And in just a very short time, we had really delicious grape juice. I never used much the wild grapes, muscadine. I think that's what they're called. And it's interesting. My mother would, as I said, she would buy the morel mushrooms, which we call dryland fish, from this family along the mountain ridge over near the river. And she would saute those. Sometimes she would dip them in flour and saute them, and they were so delicious. But as an adult, trying to find someone to buy those fresh mushrooms from was a little difficult, because I realized that people who knew where they grew didn't like sharing the location, and they usually just kept them all for themselves. So we do have a friend now who is very knowledgeable about mushrooms, and he always knows where the best ones are. And in the spring, he always has a lot of morels.
Now, did your dad or somebody you know gather ginseng and sell it, or is that an incorrect memory that I have?
I knew people who did gather ginseng and sell it. Again, that was a very secretive location. If someone had a patch of ginseng growing somewhere, they didn't share it. And they gathered it in secret because it was valuable. And in the country, anything that you could gather from the land to sell and get some money for, that was pretty major. So that helped out a lot.
And although tobacco, we think about it with cigarettes, it's actually a sacred plant used by Native Americans, and a lot of your income growing up, or not growing up, but being married, was from
raising tobacco. Well, I do understand that tobacco is a sacred plant to some cultures. I'm reminded of something a friend of mine says, everything in moderation. Although I'm not sure that you can take nicotine in moderation. So when we realized we're raising a poison, for me that's what it felt like. And we didn't do that anymore. And of course, the tobacco companies who added nicotine. And then when the farmers started spraying pesticides and herbicides, at that point, you just wasn't sure what you were consuming when you consumed it. So,
do you think you'll always have an herb garden?
Yes. As long as I'm able to cook.
What would be and herbs? A lot of times people don't realize that cooking with plants and herbs, that's just as medicinal can be as taking them in a tincture or a tea. What would be your 5 top herbs that you would want to have with you at all times?
Well, basil, which is seasonal. I used to try to keep basil over the winter, and would have some success. And then I would dry it, and I would chop it and put it in ice cubes and keep it that way. Then you can put it in soup like that. But of the perennial herbs, it would be sage, rosemary, thyme. Lavender doesn't do well in the winter, but I love basil and I love lavender. And chives as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, anything else you'd like to contribute to?
Well, I would just say that when you lived in the country, herbs and plants were a huge part of your life. I can remember my father talking about when they would butcher cattle and hogs for their, to last over the winter. And of course, at that time we had very severe winters, so you could actually hang a beef, and there were ways to cure the meat. But I always felt like plants were as important a part of the diet of the people who lived around this area as meat was. So that's why I think that the midwife, the white witch, I think they were so respected.